Most people do not consider swarming to be a queen-related event, but I do, and I'm going to tell you all about it in this video. Swarming is a very natural process in honeybee colonies. In fact, it's probably what honeybee colonies want to do more than anything else. When a colony is swarming, it's essentially giving birth, right? A swarm is a baby bee colony being born from the loins of the hive. I mean, it's really poetic and beautiful to think about. But the timing of swarming can be the death knell in your honey production, because bees most want to swarm in the weeks leading up to the major nectar flow, as well as in the early weeks of the major nectar flow, because that's when all the resources are available to that new swarm that's gone out there that now has to find a nest site, move into it, build wax, and store enough honey to be able to survive winter. So bees most want to swarm in the early part of the nectar flow when you least need them to swarm. You need all of your bees to be present in order to maximize honey production in that colony. Not only that, but swarming produces a queenless situation. I'm going to round everything to the nearest week to make it easy to discuss, but when a colony swarms, they usually swarm once they have ripe queen cells in the nest. That means capped, fully developed queen cells. Queens won't emerge from those cells for about 1 week. It takes that new queen about 2 weeks to mate and lay her first egg. When she lays her first egg, it takes 1, 2, 3 weeks for it to go through all the developmental stages before it becomes an adult bee that emerges out of the comb to do stuff in your nest. So not only in a swarming event did you lose half of the bees or more, but you've also lost up to 6 weeks of brood production, depending on how long it takes that colony to make a new queen, get her mated, get her laying, and get brood being produced. Guess what? If all of that occurs while they should be foraging for nectar and converting it to honey so that you can extract, then you are going to lose honey production. So swarming events are queen events, and they're all often the least opportunistic times, the times that you least want it to happen because it makes the greatest impact. So how can you know that your colony swarmed? Well, there's some things that I look for when I go into a colony to determine if they've swarmed. The first thing, though, is not even something that occurs in the nest. It's something that's happening all around that colony. That would be the environmental cues that tell the colony to want to swarm in the first place. Just to give you an example, if I were to go into that colony in late summer through fall and I saw some of these things I'm about to tell you about related to swarming, my mind would not default to swarming. I'd say, yeah, it's not really the time of year to swarm. I may be seeing these signs of swarming, but it's not really when it's supposed to happen, so I'm going to default to another explanation. If, on the other hand, I see these things line up at a time of the year I would expect the bees to swarm, for me that would be weeks leading up to the major nectar flow and really at any point through the major nectar flow, then I would say, hey, this thing likely swarms. So what am I looking for? Well, I'm looking for clear turnover of the queen. Every beekeeper is different. I'm not trying to talk you into clipping and marking your queens, but I like to clip and mark my queens. If during the nectar flow I see an unclipped and unmarked queen in the nest, then I assume they tried to swarm. Because my old queen's not in there, there's not a clip marked queen in there, there is this new queen running around in the nest, I say to myself, I've lost a swarm. Now, many people will counter that and say, Jamie, I've seen that happen in my colonies, but I didn't see a reduction in bee population at all. That is one of the most common things I hear related to swarm denial. And what do I mean by that? Well, think about it. Colonies are swarming, again, in the weeks leading up to the major nectar flow and the first few weeks of the major nectar flow, so they're swarming when their populations are as strong as they're going to be. The frames are packed with brood. There's a lot of capped brood. The bees are strong. Life is good. And if you take half of those bees out of the hive and push them away with a swarm, in 7 days you wouldn't miss those bees because all of those new bees are emerging out of the comb. So you can't use bee population as the sole indicator, because within a week of swarming you can have as many bees in the nest as you did the week before. What's really more important is looking at the brood. Are there eggs and young larvae in the nest? If there are not, and that's coupled with the fact that there are queen cells, then you know, if you're in swarm season, that your colony likely swarmed. Don't use strength of a colony to judge whether it swarmed or not. Look at the status of the brood. If there's eggs present, the queen was there within the last 3 days, and while it may have swarmed, it probably didn't, especially if you're not seeing queen cells. But if you're seeing no eggs, no young brood, emerging older brood, and lots of queen cells, and you're in the weeks leading up to the major nectar flow or during the major nectar flow, bells and whistles should be going off in your head telling you, my colony swarmed, I need to do something about it. If that exact same scenario happens in the middle of summer or fall, I might think something else. I might simply think that there was a queen problem and the queen died, or they were requeening or superseding or whatever. But if it happens in tandem with a significant nectar flow, my default answer is swarming. So again, what am I looking for? Ripe queen cells that are on the perimeter of the comb. They can build swarm cells on the face of the comb where there's brood, but typically swarms are planned events. So they're making queen cells on purpose that queens are laying into, that they are growing big and fat, and you tend to see these occur on the edges of the frame. I see these queen cells. I see no eggs in the nest. I see middle-aged larvae or older. And even if the population looks completely unchanged, my mind defaults to this colony swarmed. And so then I'll go through the nest and see if I can find the queen. If I don't find that queen and I assume that they swarm, then I have to take measures to try to fix the problem, which means you've got to requeen that colony. I've got a great video all about requeening. I talk about multiple methods you can use to requeen colonies, even in events where swarming occurs. But it's really important on the front end to be able to recognize that your colony swarmed. I want to tell you one last little trick that happens to me quite a bit. As I noted, I like to clip and mark my queens. So my queens that are clipped should not be capable of going out with a swarm. That means the bees may try to leave with her, but they'll crawl back into the nest, and if the queen is able to get back into the nest, she will. But there are many, many, many times where the colony tries to swarm, where the queen tries to go with them, and instead of going back into the nest, the queen simply goes underneath the hive, because I use screen bottom boards, and the bees cluster with her. So my bees shouldn't be able to swarm, but if I'm missing a queen, I've got queen cells and no eggs, and all these other things are telling me that they swarmed, I'll go into the brood box and tip up my hive, and I often find the swarm immediately under that nest, and then I can do something with that swarm. And that's just me because I clip my queens. If you don't clip your queens, you have to rely very heavily on these other cues to know that your colony swarms. Swarming is not the end of the world. Your colony's likely to survive. You'll have to take some steps to maybe help it along if you want to get the right queen in there, but it can significantly impact honey production, especially if it occurs during the nectar flow. So hopefully something I've shared with you today will help you recognize when your colony swarms.